This is Land of Havilah, 2 Kings 23a. Yahweh told Josiah, quote, "My wrath shall be kindled against this place, and it will not be quenched," end quote. That being the case, we might think Josiah would give up on the land and not bother with the hard work of reform, but no. Verse 1. The king sent, and they gathered to him all the elders of Judah and of Jerusalem. Comment, Josiah gathered together all the leading men of Judah and Jerusalem. Verse 2. The king went up to Yahweh's house, and all the men of Judah and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with him, with the priests, the prophets, and all the people, both small and great. And he read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant, which was found in Yahweh's house. Comment, Josiah recently heard the law of Moses for the first time when Shaphan the scribe read it to him in private. Now Josiah has gathered this assembly at Yahweh's house for a public reading. After the reading, verse 3, the king stood by the pillar and made a covenant before Yahweh to walk after Yahweh and to keep his commandments, his testimonies, and his statutes with all his heart and all his soul, to confirm the words of this covenant that were written in this book. And all the people agreed to the covenant. Comment, the boy who took the throne at the age of 8 has grown to a man who takes aggressive action, and the people have responded positively. They agreed to abide by the law. For Josiah's part, it was with all his heart and soul. So no, he's not going to give up on reforms. He's going to pursue the law full speed ahead, first by cleaning up the idolatry. Verse 4. The king commanded Hilkiah the high priest, and the priests of the second order, and the keepers of the threshold, to bring out of Yahweh's temple all the vessels that were made for Baal, for the Asherah, and for all the army of the sky, and he burned them outside of Jerusalem in the fields of the Kydron, and carried their ashes to Bethel. Comment, the Kydron Valley was about a quarter-mile east of the temple. Josiah burned some objects there and took the ashes to Bethel, which was about 11 miles north. Why take the ashes to Bethel? It was in Bethel the people of the northern kingdom worshipped at the altar to a golden calf. That went on for about 200 years, and after that, for about the last 80 years, the Mesopotamian transplants have been maintaining the site and the altar for the worship of their own gods, 2 Kings 17:29 and 23:15. So Josiah is going to dump the ashes there, the ashes of the objects of Baal, Asherah, and the army of the sky, so as to avoid contaminating Judah with them. Verse 5. He got rid of the idolatrous priests whom the kings of Judah had ordained to burn incense in the high places in the cities of Judah and in the places around Jerusalem, those also who burned incense to Baal, to the sun and to the moon and to the planets, to all the army of the sky. Comment, Josiah's great-grandfather Hezekiah cleaned out all the high places, 2 Kings 18:4, but his grandfather reestablished them, 2 Kings 21:3. Josiah got rid of the priests of those places. That could mean he stoned them to death according to the law, Deuteronomy 17:5. But if he had the sense of Christ, he knew that stoning would have been hypocritical in that generation, John 8:7. Verse 9 coming later will confirm that Josiah did not kill them. Now verse 6. He brought out the Asherah from Yahweh's house outside of Jerusalem to the brook Kydron, and burned it at the brook Kydron, and beat it to dust, and cast its dust on the graves of the common people. Comment, the Asherah in Yahweh's house was an image of the goddess Asherah. Josiah took it out of the temple, burned it at the Kydron Valley, and spread the ashes in a graveyard. Dead bodies were ceremonially unclean according to the law, Numbers 19:11, so perhaps Josiah thought a graveyard was unclean anyway. Verse 7. He broke down the houses of the male shrine prostitutes that were in Yahweh's house, where the women wove hangings for the Asherah. Comment, either in Yahweh's house or in the courtyards of it, the two previous kings had allowed the construction of houses or cubicles or quarters for use by male cult prostitutes, and in the same areas there were women who wove fabric for Asherah. Perhaps they were for decorative hangings, or it was material for the construction of tents or shelters or shrines to Asherah. Josiah cleaned all that out of the temple and courtyards. Verse 8. He brought all the priests out of the cities of Judah and defiled the high places where the priests had burned incense, from Geba to Beersheba, and he broke down the high places of the gates that were at the entrance of the gate of Joshua, the governor of the city, which were on a man's left hand at the gate of the city. Comment, Geba to Beersheba was the north to the south of Judah. Josiah defiled the high places, meaning he made them unusable by desecrating them in some manner. There was an idolatrous place at one of the gates in Jerusalem, the gate of Joshua, the governor of the city. He broke that down. Verse 9. Nevertheless, the priests of the high places didn't come up to Yahweh's altar in Jerusalem, but they ate unleavened bread among their brothers. Comment, Josiah didn't kill the idolatrous priests. He only disqualified them from serving at Yahweh's altar in Jerusalem. Verse 10. He defiled Topheth, which was in the valley of the children of Hinnom, that no man might make his son or his daughter to pass through the fire to Molech. Comment, the valley of Hinnom was somewhere on the south side of Jerusalem. It was the border dividing Judah and Benjamin, Joshua 15:8. In that valley, at the specific location Topheth, parents burned their children to Molech. The Old Testament Hebrew word Hinnom, as in the valley of Hinnom, gave rise to the New Testament Greek word Gehenna, Hinnom, Gehenna. Jesus used it, quote, whoever says you fool will be in danger of the fire of Gehenna, end quote. Only Jesus said it in Aramaic or Hebrew, and it came out Gehenna in Greek. So it's a place of human suffering by fire. Josiah destroyed the place. Verse 11. He took away the horses that the kings of Judah had given to the sun at the entrance of Yahweh's house by the room of Nathan-Melech, the officer who was in the court, and he burned the chariots of the sun with fire. Comment, according to the belief, the sun rode a chariot across the sky. At the entrance to Yahweh's house there was a statue of horses pulling the chariot of the sun. Josiah burned them. Verse 12. The king broke down the altars that were on the roof of the upper room of Ahaz, which the kings of Judah had made, and the altars which Manasseh had made in the two courts of Yahweh's house, and beat them down from there, and cast their dust into the brook Kydron. Comment, Josiah's father and grandfather put altars on the roof of the palace and in the courts of the temple. Josiah got rid of them. Verse 13. The king defiled the high places that were before Jerusalem, which were on the right hand of the mountain of corruption, which Solomon the king of Israel had built for Ashtoreth, the abomination of the Sidonians, and for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, and for Milcom, the abomination of the children of Ammon. He broke in pieces the pillars, cut down the Asherah poles, and filled their places with men's bones. Comment, the mountain of corruption was the Mount of Olives next to Jerusalem. 300 years earlier, Solomon put worship centers on the Mount of Olives for various gods, 1 Kings 11:7. One was for Ashtoreth, goddess of the Sidonians, which was not the same as Asherah, an older goddess that originated in Mesopotamia. Then about 80 years earlier, Hezekiah tore down the high places of Judah, 2 Kings 18:4. But maybe he skipped over the ones on the Mount of Olives, or maybe he destroyed them, then someone built them again. Anyway, Josiah destroyed them. Now coming up, Josiah is going to go up personally to Bethel, which is about 11 miles north of Jerusalem. It was one of the two places where Jeroboam had the golden calf that caused Israel to stumble for so many years, 1 Kings 12:29 and 30. That area is now part of the kingdom of Assyria, but apparently coming up, the Assyrians don't have any military forces in place to stop Josiah from doing whatever he wants. He's going to go through all the lands of the old northern kingdom of Israel, demolishing idols and altars, starting in Bethel, verse 15. Moreover, the altar that was at Bethel, at the high place which Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin, had made, even that altar and the high place he broke down, and he burned the high place and beat it to dust and burned the Asherah. Comment, this was the 300-year-old altar and high place Jeroboam built, 1 Kings 12:29 through 33. Josiah is finally putting a stop to the sin of Jeroboam. Verse 16. As Josiah turned himself, he spied the tombs that were in the mountain, and he sent and took the bones out of the tombs and burned them on the altar, and defiled it according to Yahweh's word, which the man of God proclaimed, who proclaimed these things. Comment, that was the fulfillment of a 300-year-old prophecy. An unnamed prophet came out of Judah and told Jeroboam that a king of the future named Josiah would come and burn men's bones on his altar. The prophet turned to go home, but another prophet, an old one from Bethel, detained him. The young prophet died the same day, and the old prophet buried him in Bethel and gave instructions to his sons, "Bury me in the tomb where we buried the young prophet." So there are two prophets in the tomb, 1 Kings 13. Coming up, Josiah is going to take notice of the tomb, verse 17. Then he said, "What monument is that which I see?" The men of the city told him, "It is the tomb of the man of God who came from Judah and proclaimed these things that you have done against the altar of Bethel." He said, "Let him be, let no one move his bones." So they let his bones alone with the bones of the prophet who came out of Samaria. Comment: Josiah was removing bones from various graves and using them to desecrate the altar at Bethel, but he ordered that no one should disturb these bones in the tomb of the two prophets. Verse 19. All the houses also of the high places that were in the cities of Samaria, which the kings of Israel had made to provoke Yahweh to anger, Josiah took away and did to them according to all the acts that he had done in Bethel. Comment: He went through all the old northern kingdom and destroyed the high places like he did in Bethel. Verse 20. He killed all the priests of the high places that were there on the altars and burned men's bones on them, and he returned to Jerusalem. Comment: That was the fulfillment of a second part of the old-time prophecy that Josiah would sacrifice the priests of the high places on the altar at Bethel. So he did kill the pagan priests in Samaria, but not in Judah. 2 Kings 23b is next at landofhavilah.net, 2 Kings 23b. This is the map of 2 Kings 23a. This is a satellite view of modern Jerusalem. This is the Kydron Valley, home of the brook Kydron. The temple was about a quarter mile to the east, so it wasn't far to carry the objects. Child sacrifice was in the valley of Hinnom, somewhere on the south side of the old city, perhaps this valley. The valley was the dividing line of Judah to the south and Benjamin to the north. The particular place of child sacrifice in the valley was Topheth. Zooming out, Josiah took ashes to Bethel, which was about 11 miles north. Bethel was in the old northern kingdom. Judah ran from Geba in the north to Beersheba in the south. Josiah went through all Judah and all the old northern kingdom, destroying high places all the way to Naphtali in this area, 2 Chronicles 34:6. 2 Kings 23b is next.